Yeah, so in our site where we farm on 5 acres, we also have a tenant who rents a beautiful home on the larger property. And so we've had to build relationships with several tenants over the few years who have rented out this home on the property. And it's been, good at times and bad in others, and, sometimes just sort of mediocre. But it's really just trying to build a relationship of trust, of, being able to be respectful of each of our sort of like spaces, and also just being communicative, right? Like some of the challenges that we've seen in the past with some of the tenants who have lived at the site has been, having people over for events or volunteer days or gatherings or any sort of, get together that might be just like close homies and friends, family members. And, sometimes folks feel like they're entitled to the larger space when in reality it's not in their scope of being able to dictate whether folks are allowed to be on the site or not. And so I think just really being able to have those honest conversations with the folks who are planning to become future tenants when they're here, just making sure that they know what's going on here, and that there is an open line of communication, and inviting, bringing in folks that are here living on the site to our gatherings, to our events, to learn more about what we're doing, and inviting them with products that we grow here, flowers, and letting them know that our work is really important, and that we are in co-creation of the space as well, right? That even though they live here, we work here, making sure that we can be clear with our expectations and future plans as well is something to really make sure it's just known. But we also share a well, we share electricity, and these are always like an ongoing thing depending on the tenant. Some tenants are easy to communicate and work through these sort of like challenging moments of like really understanding what's going on. But on some occasions they've been tumultuous and hard, right? Of being able to have an ongoing conversation around like who gets to pay what and what electricity is being used, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a challenge constantly, and it also just depends on who the tenant may be. Every individual comes with different experiences and ways in which they present themselves in this world, and so it's a constant way of trying to explore that, understand it, find solutions rather than just continuing with the idea that it's just a challenge and that they may be challenging. There's a solution to all things, and so I think making sure that we can meet them where they're at, finding compromises is a really important thing that I've come to learn in many ways, and just making sure that we can live together in a location that that makes sense for the both of us. We're constantly here as farmers, so we're on the land, working the land, and so we want to be able to make sure that the folks who live here feel safe, feel heard, understood, and vice versa, right? And so I think it's just an ongoing introduction of revisiting, understanding, checking in with one another as to like how things have been, and also being able to hear constructive feedback. It's not always easy to hear that and get defensive, and just really just kind of going in with open ears and just sort of letting it slide, and hopes that there can be a way ways for us to find solutions to these larger issues that are happening or not happening, and it just may be grievances on their end that they want to just sort of share that have nothing to really do with how we're doing things on the farm, but just feel like they need to have some sort of way to communicate that to us through their own issues. But it's a relationship, just like any sort of relationship. You gotta have the ability to be open and willing to find things that make sense for both parties, and also just knowing that there are going to be triggers and there are going to be things that may be said, and to not take them personally. But it has been it's a job in itself, besides trying to run a farm, to live in a space and co-live in a space where different ways of doing things are being done on a space that runs a business and is also being lived on at the same time. So just being mindful and making sure that you're introducing yourself, you're coming in with the idea of positiveness and being inclusive. That's all I can really say in terms of our neighbors. Yeah, I think sort of the conflicts that we've seen with one of our past tenants here that had rented the larger home here at the farm has been just like who is allowed and who is not allowed on the property. And even though the house is separate from the farming capacity, I think that was a really difficult thing for me as someone who's farming, and we utilize the space in a respectful way, with never degrading or deemed disrespectful to the tenants who live in this space as well. And so that had been a contentious sort of conversation of where people will park, who is here, is there liability in case someone got hurt, which of course there's always these things of thinking around liability for us as farmers, but we also know a lot of these folks. We've built relationships with them. We have expectations for them, and we would never put any of our close family and friends or acquaintances or unknown folks in any specific circumstances that they shouldn't be. And so that was something that was brought to my attention from our past tenants, is like bringing dogs because they had a dog, that they didn't want other dogs or tons of human beings here at the site. And, as a working farm, we want to be able to bring people to our site to educate them about what we're doing and how we're doing them, and also making events that involve having folks enjoy the space, even if it has nothing to do with the food that we're growing, but is a container for us to invite folks in a larger space of landscape. So I think that was a really hard thing for me, dealing with neighbors who happen to be tenants, around getting to tell us whom and when people are allowed here, whether they be humans or kinship. And so I think that's like a really big it's a big conversation to continually have with them, of working something out and making sure that we're able to find a solution to things. But that was a huge challenge that we had to run into, and there were several conversations that didn't always go according on either end, and can sometimes deteriorate that relationship in many ways, which sometimes people decide that maybe living on a working farm isn't necessarily what they had envisioned, or may even thought was a way for them to live. So that's sort of the larger sort of conversation.